"You'll be better off staying here forever, Dad," my son said as he stood at the edge of my hospital bed, adjusting his watch like he had somewhere more important to be. My ribs ached, my skin was pale, and the beep of machines filled the silence he left behind. He didn't wait for me to answer. Just turned and walked out. That house he lived in, my house, wasn't even mentioned. In that moment, something inside me hardened. I wasn't dying here. And when I walked out of that hospital, I was taking everything back, starting with the house. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. There was a time I thought I was the luckiest man alive. I married my high school sweetheart, Marjorie, back in the spring of '72. She had this way of laughing like she didn't care who was watching. We didn't have much, but we had enough: a small apartment above a bakery, a beat-up Buick that barely made it up the hill, and a dream of one day owning a house with a backyard big enough for a swing set and a garden. Then came Paul, our only son. Marjorie called him her little sunrise, because he came after the darkest time of our life, her miscarriage, 2 years of trying again, and the look she gave me when the doctor said we might never have children. And then there he was. Bright eyes, strong lungs, always hungry. I held him the first time and cried like I hadn't since my father died. I worked my hands to the bone in those years. 2 jobs, construction during the day, warehouse graveyard shift 3 nights a week. My fingers were always raw, my knees ached every morning, but I never once thought of quitting. Every hammer swing was a promise, to Marjorie, to Paul, to the life we were building. Marjorie made that apartment feel like a palace. She clipped coupons, sewed Paul's baby clothes by hand, and kept the radio playing old jazz as she danced barefoot in the kitchen. I'd come home, exhausted, and she'd meet me at the door with a kiss and a warm plate. She believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. When Paul turned 6, I bought the land. It took everything we had: savings, a small loan, and a second-hand truck I sold to make the down payment. I spent every weekend for nearly a year building that house. I laid the foundation with a few friends from the construction site, raised the walls with my own sweat, and sanded the floors with Marjorie humming behind me. She picked the paint color for every room. I carved our initials into the corner beam of the front porch when it was done. It was our home. Paul grew up there. He had his own room, a treehouse in the backyard, and a father who never missed a birthday. We taught him how to ride a bike on that cracked driveway, baked cookies in the old gas oven, and planted a lemon tree that still leans toward the sun near the back fence. That house wasn't just wood and nails, it was laughter, bandaged knees, holiday dinners, and late-night talks about dreams and fears. Marjorie died too young. Ovarian cancer. It snuck up on us, like a thief. By the time we found it, she had maybe 6 months. She made me promise not to cry too much in front of Paul. Be his anchor, she whispered, her hand trembling in mine. He's going to need you more than ever. And I tried. God knows I tried. I held myself together, packed his lunch every day, helped with homework, and kept up the house like she would have wanted. I didn't date again. Couldn't. Every time I looked at another woman, all I saw was how they weren't her. Paul struggled, but he came through it. He got into college, state school, nothing fancy, but I was proud. I paid his tuition with my pension fund and a little help from a community scholarship. He never asked for much, and I never let him see how much I gave up. When he brought Rachel home, I was cautious. She was sharp-tongued, quick to correct, always had something to prove. Marjorie would have said she had an iron jaw and paper skin, meaning she gave as good as she got, but couldn't take it. Still, if Paul loved her, I wasn't going to stand in the way. They married young. Moved to the city for a while, tried to start their life together. I visited once, saw the cramped apartment with peeling paint and a view of the dumpster, and said nothing. Just hugged them both, left some groceries, and drove home with tears in my eyes. Paul called a month later. They were struggling. Couldn't keep up with rent, Rachel had lost her job, and they needed somewhere to stay. Just for a few months. Of course, I said yes. I cleared out the guest room, stocked the fridge, and told them to stay as long as they needed. They moved in the following weekend. I didn't realize it then, but that was the last time my house truly felt like mine. At first, it was good. We had dinners together, laughed over old movies, and Paul even helped me with some repairs around the house. I taught him how to fix the boiler, change the filters, small things that made me feel useful again. Rachel was polite, distant, but civil. I didn't push. The months turned into a year. Then another. I never asked for rent. Never asked when they'd be moving out. I figured, maybe this was how life was supposed to go now. A full house again. Family under one roof. I started thinking that maybe, just maybe, this was a blessing in disguise. But looking back now, those were the last of the good years. The final stretch where I still felt like a father, like a provider, like a man with a place in the home he built. Before everything shifted. Before I started feeling like a ghost in my own living room. I can't say exactly when it started, because it wasn't all at once. It was quiet. Subtle. Like a slow leak in a tire, you don't notice until you're running on the rim. Maybe it was the way Rachel started referring to the house as our place when her friends came over. The first time I heard her say it, I let it go. Thought maybe she meant our in the broad sense, our family, our home. But the second time, and then the third, it felt deliberate. She'd smile just wide enough to make me question if I was being too sensitive. Then came the little changes. I came home from a doctor's appointment one afternoon and noticed the photos in the hallway were gone. Old black and whites of Marjorie, Paul as a toddler in the yard, even our wedding photo that had been hanging there since we moved in. Replaced with modern art prints, abstract stuff I didn't understand. I asked Paul about it, and he just said, Rachel thought the hallway needed a refresh. No apology. No warning. It stung. I didn't say anything, but that night I dug through a storage bin in the garage and found Marjorie's photo. I put it on my nightstand, next to the old alarm clock she'd given me for our 10th anniversary. I looked at her face and said, "You seeing this, love? They're redecorating like I'm already gone." Paul started spending more time in their room, headphones on, gaming or working late. We barely spoke during meals anymore. Rachel would make something gluten-free or plant-based and set aside a plate for me, usually something bland and cold by the time I got to it. I missed the meatloaf Marjorie used to make. I missed asking how his day went and getting more than a shrug. One Sunday morning, I walked into the kitchen and found them having coffee, whispering. They went quiet when I entered. Rachel didn't even look up from her mug. Paul gave me a polite nod. The air felt different. Like I'd walked into someone else's house without knocking. I started noticing other things too. Packages arriving that I hadn't ordered, smart home devices, sleek modern decor, kitchen gadgets we didn't need. Once I saw a box labeled nursery wall decals. My stomach turned. They hadn't said anything about kids. Not a word. But here they were planning a nursery, in my house? When I asked Paul about it, he brushed it off. Just planning ahead, he said, without looking up from his phone. Planning ahead? I repeated, trying to keep my voice even. In whose house? He looked at me then. For the first time in weeks. There was a flicker of something in his eyes, annoyance? Embarrassment? I couldn't tell. Dad, we're all living here. It's natural we'd want to make the space work for our future too. I didn't reply. I just nodded slowly and left the room. But inside, something cracked. Bills started showing up with only Paul's name on them. He switched the cable account, the water bill, even the Wi-Fi. I asked him about it once, trying to keep it light. "Hey, you planning to kick me out or just rename the whole house while I'm sleeping?" He laughed. "No, Dad, it's just easier to manage. Everything's digital now." "Easier?" "Right. They put a lock on their bedroom door. Then they added one to the basement. I didn't ask why. I knew better by then. The house was becoming theirs. Slowly, deliberately. One decision at a time. I started eating alone. Watching TV in my room instead of the living room I built. I even began parking on the street, because Rachel started using the driveway for her new car. They were never cruel, not exactly. Not overtly. That's the part that messes with your head. There were no slamming doors, no screaming matches. Just a steady, quiet push that made it clear I was in the way. I tried to convince myself it was just a phase. That once they had kids, they'd need me again. That maybe I'd be grandpa with a purpose, teaching the little one how to hold a hammer or roast marshmallows like I did with Paul. But deep down, I knew. I wasn't part of their plan. I was a placeholder. The worst part? I blamed myself. I started second-guessing everything. Did I give Paul too much? Was I too soft? Did I make it too easy for them to take over? Marjorie used to say I had a blind spot for him. That I'd move heaven and earth to keep him comfortable, even if it cost me. Maybe she was right. There were nights I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the TV downstairs, and wondered what it would have been like if she were still here. Marjorie would have seen through it. She had a way of smiling while sharpening a truth like a blade. She'd have reminded them whose name was on the deed. She'd have reminded me who I was. But she wasn't here. Just me, the echoes of old memories, and the quiet, sinking realization that I was no longer welcome in my own home. I kept quiet. I watched. I told myself I was imagining things. Until the day I fell, and everything changed. It happened on a Tuesday. Not that the day matters, it could have been any day, really. But for some reason, that Tuesday is burned into my bones. I was trying to change the light bulb in the upstairs hallway. It had flickered for a week, and nobody seemed to care. I asked Paul twice if he could reach it. He's taller than me now, but he waved it off. Said he'd get to it. He never did. So I dragged the old wooden step stool out of the closet, same one Marjorie used to clean the top shelves. It wobbled under my weight, and I knew I shouldn't have been up there, but I hated asking again. I was already invisible enough. I lost my balance. Maybe the stool gave way. Maybe my leg just gave out. Either way, I remember the sharp twist of my knee, the sickening crack as I hit the floor, and the flash of pain shooting up my side. Then nothing. Just the hardwood floor and the taste of dust. When I came to, I was still alone. I don't know how long I lay there. The sun shifted across the hallway window, must have been hours. My throat was dry. My leg throbbed. I called out once or twice, but my voice didn't carry far. I remember looking down the stairs, knowing I couldn't make it down, and thinking, so this is how it happens. Not in a hospital bed. Not surrounded by family. Just here. Alone, in a house I built. Paul came home eventually. I heard the door open, keys jingling, Rachel's laughter. Then silence as they saw me sprawled on the floor. "Jesus, Dad, what happened?" Paul said, like he had walked in on a spilled drink. I tried to speak, but it came out slurred. Rachel stood back, arms crossed. "Should we call someone?" she asked, not moving an inch. Paul knelt beside me, touched my wrist. "Can you sit up? You shouldn't be doing stuff like this alone." That word, shouldn't. Like I was a child who'd disobeyed. Like my fall was some minor inconvenience. They took me to the hospital. No ambulance. Paul folded me into the back seat of his car, careful not to let my head rest against the leather. At the ER, he filled out the forms, answered the nurse's questions like he was the legal guardian, and barely glanced at me. I remember looking at his profile under the fluorescent lights, wondering how I raised a man so cold. The doctors said it was a cracked rib, a sprained knee, and dehydration. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to keep me admitted for observation. The next morning, Paul came in alone. Sat by the foot of the bed. No coffee, no warm smile, just a man checking a box. "You'll be better off staying here for a while," he said. "They'll take care of you. It's safer." I asked, "You mean, rehab?" He shrugged. "Or longer. We'll see how things go. There's this place near the lake. Not far." I stared at him. I didn't say anything for a while. Just watched the way he avoided my eyes. Then I asked quietly, "You don't want me to come home, do you?" He sighed. "It's not like that, Dad. It's just, the house isn't safe anymore. Stairs. Narrow hallways. You need help." "I need family," I said, my voice shaking. "Not strangers." He stood up then, adjusted his coat. "We'll talk later." That was it. That was the moment. No fight. No breakdown. Just a clean, quiet betrayal that cut deeper than any words could. The next day, a nurse brought in some brochures. Assisted living facilities. Monthly rates. One of them had a little sticky note on it, "Good reviews." I asked her who gave it to her. She said, "Your son dropped it off." That night, I barely slept. I kept hearing Marjorie's voice in my head, "He needs you more than ever." But he didn't. Not anymore. 2 days later, Rachel visited. She didn't even sit down. She just stood at the foot of the bed, phone in hand, tapping through her notifications. "We're thinking of converting your room into an office," she said casually. "Paul needs a workspace. And maybe in the future, a nursery." I looked at her, stunned. "You're already planning that?" She blinked. "Well, we have to plan ahead, right?" Then she left. No hug. No goodbye. Just that. I sat there, surrounded by the whir of machines and the shuffle of nurses, and realized I had been erased. Replaced. Dismissed. I was no longer Paul's father. I was an inconvenience. A name on a deed. A body in a hospital bed. And nobody, was coming to bring me home. The hospital is a strange place to feel invisible. You're surrounded by people, nurses, doctors, patients in neighboring beds, but somehow, you feel like you've been muted. Like your voice no longer matters. A few days after Rachel's visit, I overheard 2 nurses chatting outside my room. "That's the one whose son signed the transfer papers," one whispered. "The elder care facility upstate?" "Yeah. Fancy place. But he didn't tell the old man yet. Said it might upset him." I didn't move. Didn't breathe. I just stared at the ceiling, heart pounding like a drum. "He signed something?" That evening, I asked the nurse assigned to me if I could see my discharge plan. She hesitated. Said she'd have to check. When she returned, she had a folder in her hand and a tight look on her face. "There's a temporary care arrangement pending, a rehabilitation stay, with possible long-term options based on your recovery," she explained, choosing every word like she was defusing a bomb. "Who authorized that?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Your son. He left a contact number and signed the request forms yesterday." I didn't reply. Just nodded, took the folder, and waited for her to leave. Inside were glossy brochures. Pictures of smiling elderly folks playing bingo, holding hands, eating soft meals. The name of the place was Willow Acres. sounded peaceful. Looked like a hotel. But it wasn't home. It wasn't my home. And it wasn't a suggestion. It was a plan. There was a yellow sticky note on one of the pages. I recognized Rachel's handwriting immediately. Private room is more expensive, but worth it. Check insurance. She didn't even address it to me. That night, I stared at the ceiling, too numb to cry. I thought of the lemon tree in the backyard, how Marjorie used to cut slices for her tea. I thought of the squeak in the stair railing Paul used to slide down. I thought of how, once upon a time, that house felt like a heartbeat. Now, they were planning to erase me from it, quietly, efficiently, and with paperwork. The next morning, I borrowed a nurse's phone under the excuse of calling my insurance. Instead, I called Carl. Carl and I go back decades. We served together in the Navy, built our lives side by side. He became a lawyer, I became a builder. I told him everything. Not just about the hospital. About the whispers, the decorations being replaced, the bills being switched, the brochures. About how I felt like a ghost still breathing. Carl was silent for a moment, then said, "Is the house still in your name?" "Yes." "Sole owner." "Never transferred anything." "Then you've still got the hammer, Henry," he said. "And it's time you started swinging." I didn't understand what he meant at first. But the next day, he visited me at the hospital, briefcase in hand. He brought documents. Options. Words I hadn't thought of in years: power of attorney, deed retention, will restructuring. "Paul's building a future on property he doesn't own," Carl said. "If you don't make moves now, they'll make them for you." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, but because I was awake for the first time in months. I saw it all clearly now. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was a strategy. They wanted the house. They wanted the title, the land, the memories, without the man who built it. Without the man who made it a home. The next day, I asked the nurse to help me get dressed. I asked for a walker instead of a wheelchair. I took the elevator down, asked a cab to take me to the bank. It was messy, slow, painful, but I did it. With Carl waiting at the other end. We signed the first round of documents that afternoon. Not to disown Paul. Not yet. But to protect what was mine. Back in my room, I found another message from Rachel. This one on my phone. "Hope you're feeling better. We've been talking to the caseworker. It's really best if you stay for the long term. Paul's overwhelmed with house stuff. Think about it, okay? House stuff. Like it was already theirs. Like I was the guest." That night, I had a dream. I was sitting on the front porch of the house, just like in the old days. Marjorie was beside me, shelling peas in a bowl. She looked at me and said, "They're not taking the house, Henry. You are." I woke up with tears on my face. And I knew then what I had to do next. Speech balloon. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. 2 weeks later, I was discharged from the hospital. Against their plans. Paul was surprised when he showed up and found me dressed, standing at the nurse's desk with a packed bag. He looked at the paperwork in my hand like it was some kind of mistake. "You're not going to Willow Acres?" he asked, eyebrows rising. "No," I said calmly. "I'm going home." He glanced at the nurse, then back at me. "Dad, we already arranged everything. They've got a room ready for you." I mean, it's already paid for." "I didn't ask you to pay for anything," I said, looking him in the eye. "And I didn't ask to be put in a home." His mouth opened slightly, but he had no response. I stepped past him and walked toward the sliding doors, each step of the walker scraping against the floor like punctuation marks in a sentence he didn't want to hear. The ride back was quiet. He offered to drive, and I let him. I wanted him to see every street, every turn, every memory that led back to the house he thought was his. When we pulled into the driveway, Rachel was already outside. She gave me a little wave and a tight smile. "Welcome back," she said, like a hotel receptionist. I didn't respond. Inside, things were different. My things were gone from the living room. The recliner I'd sat in for 15 years? Replaced by a sleek, modern sofa. The bookshelf? Packed up. My coffee mug? Disappeared. I walked to my room. Thank God it was still intact, though the bed was stripped bare. Rachel followed behind me and said, "We didn't think you'd be coming back, so we started making some changes. Hope that's okay." I looked at her. "It's not." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," I said. "This is my house." She scoffed lightly. "You're still recovering, Henry. We were just trying to make things easier." Easier for whom? That evening, I sat in the kitchen with Paul. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead. I just laid it out. "I know about Willow Acres. I know you signed the papers. I know you plan to keep me there." Without asking me. Without even having a conversation. Paul shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "We were doing what's best, Dad. You fell. You're not as strong as you used to be. We were worried." "No," I said. "You were planning. Planning to clear me out. Planning a nursery. Planning renovations. Like I was already gone." "Don't twist this," he snapped. "You don't understand how stressful it's been with you here." There it was. The truth, finally. I didn't belong anymore. "Do you remember who paid for this house?" I asked, staring at him. He looked away. "It's not about that." "It's entirely about that," I said. "You live here because I let you. Not because you earned it. Not because you paid for it. I invited you in, Paul. When you had nothing. And now you're trying to push me out." He sighed, leaning back. "We just need space, Dad. Our own life. We're adults now. Married. We need to grow. Then grow somewhere else," I said, voice steady. His eyes narrowed. "You don't mean that." But I did. I meant every word. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at Marjorie's photo again. I whispered, "I tried, love. I tried to be patient. To be kind. To be family. But I think we raised a man who only remembers the comfort and forgets the cost." The next morning, I got a visit from Mr. O'Connell, our neighbor 2 doors down. He'd seen me get out of the car and came over with fresh bread and a sympathetic look. "Wasn't expecting you back so soon," he said, handing me the loaf. "Glad you're all right." I nodded. "Still breathing." He hesitated. "If you ever need help with anything, I'm around." There was something in his voice. Something knowing. "You heard, didn't you?" I asked. He looked down, a bit embarrassed. "They've been talking, Henry. Around town. About you. About the house. People noticed when Rachel had movers here while you were in the hospital. She said you were transitioning to permanent care." Made it sound final. The betrayal burned all over again, deeper now. They weren't just planning. They were announcing. "I've got to do something," I muttered. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Whatever it is, you've got friends. You're not alone." That evening, I called Carl again. "I'm ready," I told him. "Ready to make the changes." He didn't ask which ones. He already knew. "Good," he said. "We'll start with the will." Carl's office hadn't changed in 30 years. Same green-shaded desk lamp, same wall of law books he never touched, same rickety coat stand leaning slightly to the left. The only difference now was that we both walked slower. He handed me a fresh cup of coffee, black, no sugar, the way I always liked it, and sat across from me with a yellow legal pad. "You sure about this?" he asked, voice low and steady. I nodded. "Yeah. I've thought about it every night since the hospital. I'm not doing this out of anger. I'm doing it because it's the only way to be heard." Carl didn't try to talk me out of it. He never did. He just opened his notepad and said, "All right then. Let's start with the will." I gave him the basics. I wanted everything, the house, the land, the bank accounts, the retirement savings, to go into a trust. Not to Paul. Not to Rachel. I wanted it to be used for something good. Something real. A community fund, maybe. A place that helped elderly folks like me who got pushed out of their own homes. We didn't land on a name for it yet, but I had one floating in my heart, Marjorie's house. Felt right. "And Paul?" Carl asked gently. "I want it in writing. If he contests the will or tries to interfere, everything goes to charity. No second chances." He jotted that down slowly. "That'll hold. We'll make it ironclad." The pen paused again. "Do you want to leave him anything? A letter, a memory, something?" I stared at the window for a long time. "I'll leave him the truth. That's more than he left me." The next hour was a blur of signatures, initialing lines, legal language I barely understood but trusted Carl to handle. When it was over, I leaned back in the chair and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding for weeks. Carl slid the documents into a folder. "I'll file everything tomorrow. Keep this copy safe. And if anything changes." "It won't," I said. He nodded, placing a firm hand on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Henry. This isn't easy." "No," I said quietly, "but it's right." On the way home, I asked the cab driver to take a detour past the lake. It was the first place Marjorie and I had kissed. There was an old bench still standing there, crooked and chipped, but still holding firm. I sat for a while, watching the water ripple gently in the late afternoon sun. I talked to her. "I did what you asked. I stayed strong. But I had to let go of him, Marge. I had to. He doesn't see me anymore. Just a house. Just square footage and inheritance." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and summer grass. I took that as her answer. Not approval. Not condemnation. Just presence. That evening, back at the house, Paul knocked gently on my bedroom door. I didn't say anything. He opened it anyway and peeked inside. "Hey. You okay?" I looked up from my book. "Depends." He came in, sat at the edge of the bed like a child again. For a second, I saw the boy I used to carry on my shoulders. But only for a second. "Rachel's upset," he said. "She feels like you don't appreciate how much we've done to make this place livable." "Livable?" I repeated. "I built this place from dirt, Paul. I bled into these floorboards. You've been here 2 years." He didn't answer. Just looked down at his hands. Then he said, "I found some papers in the mailbox. From a law office." I stiffened. "You went through my mail?" He hesitated. "It was addressed to the house. I opened it by mistake." Lies. He knew exactly what he was doing. "So now you know," I said. "I changed the will." He stood slowly. "You're really cutting me out?" "I'm not cutting you out," I said. "You walked out the day you tried to decide where I'd die." The silence was heavy. Finally, he asked, "What happens now?" I looked him square in the eye. You live here until I say otherwise. You respect the man who gave you everything. And when I'm gone, you get nothing but your memories. Make them good ones, Paul. He didn't respond. Just nodded stiffly and left the room. I sat there for a long time after the door closed, heart thudding, emotions tangled in my chest like wires. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. And sometimes, peace comes when you stop waiting to be loved by people who only take. That night, I slept better than I had in months. I should have known they wouldn't stop. People like Paul and Rachel, they don't understand lines until they're drawn in concrete. Or court documents. The house had been quieter since that night we spoke. Paul barely acknowledged me, and Rachel? She floated through the rooms like I was a ghost. No small talk. No pleasantries. Just tension, cold and quiet, like frost on window panes in early winter. But I wasn't looking for reconciliation. I was watching. Observing. Documenting. And then came the final blow. It was a Thursday. I had gone to the library that morning, needed a break from the house. When I got back, the driveway was full. 2 trucks parked out front, one with tools hanging off the back, the other clearly marked with a contractor's logo, Modern Nest Interiors. I stood there on the curb, gripping my cane, watching a stranger carry what looked like my living room cabinet out to the front yard. I hobbled up the walk, heart pounding. Hey! I called. What's going on here? The young man paused. Delivery pickup, sir. We're clearing out furniture for renovations. Client said to start today. Client? I narrowed my eyes. Just then, Rachel came to the door, sipping from a smoothie glass like it was any other afternoon. She looked at me with that same polite indifference. You're back early. What is this? I demanded, pointing to the trucks. We're redecorating, she said simply. Open concept. New flooring. Updated lighting. In my house? My voice cracked slightly. Well, she said with a shrug, Paul, and I figured it's overdue. And since you've taken care of the legal stuff already, we assumed you were stepping back. I stared at her, stunned. You assumed I'd just let you get this place without asking? You're not exactly in shape to manage a home, Henry, she said coolly. Let alone maintain it. We're investing our time and money into keeping this place up. By throwing away my life's work? She rolled her eyes. It's furniture, not your legacy. That's when I snapped, not loudly, not violently. But inwardly, something broke clean through. I turned, stepped past the workers, and went straight to my room. I locked the door behind me. And I opened the drawer where I'd kept the folder Carl gave me. Inside were all the revised legal documents, the trust paperwork, the notarized deed changes, every piece of evidence that this house, this land, this legacy, was still mine. I picked up the phone and called Carl. They've started renovations. Without permission. Then it's time, he said. Do it. An hour later, I had the real estate agent Carl recommended on the phone. A polite, sharp woman named Dana. You want to list the property? She asked, surprised. Yes. Immediately. But, people are living in it? I didn't flinch. They're not on the deed. I am. I want the house sold. We met that weekend. Dana walked through the house taking notes, nodding at the structure, the bones, the history. I told her to leave Paul and Rachel's additions out of the listing. The house wasn't theirs to define. When Paul got home that afternoon and saw the "For Sale" sign in the front yard, he stormed into the house like a child denied dessert. You're selling the house? He shouted, face red. I am. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. Rachel joined him, arms crossed. Where are we supposed to go? You've got options, I said calmly. Apartment. Condo. Shelter. Same places I would have ended up, had I stayed at Willow Acres. Paul ran a hand through his hair. Dad, come on. You're overreacting. I stepped forward, holding the file out toward him. No, Paul. This is the reaction I should have had the minute you told me to stay at the hospital forever. You made this choice for me. Now I'm making one for myself. He looked at the papers, at the signatures, the lawyer's seal. You'll regret this, he muttered. I shook my head. I regret not seeing through you sooner. That night, I watched from the porch as they argued inside, probably weighing their options, probably Googling if they could contest anything. But I knew they couldn't. Carl had made sure of it. I went to bed feeling tired, but not weak. Empty, but not broken. I had nothing left to give them. And everything left to reclaim for myself. It was supposed to be a celebration. Rachel's baby shower. That's how they labeled it. I found the invitation on the kitchen counter, half buried under mail I no longer opened. It was addressed to friends and family, printed on glossy cardstock with pastel balloons and gold trim. I wasn't invited. Let that sink in. A party hosted in my house, the house I built, and I wasn't even given the courtesy of a verbal mention. No seat. No nod. Just silence. Like I didn't exist. I watched the guests arrive from my bedroom window. Cars lining the street. Laughter. Shiny gift bags, pink ribbons, little boxes labeled Mom-to-be. They'd even rented a catering service. Tables set up in the backyard. I saw them stringing lights on the lemon tree Marjorie and I planted. The one where we used to sit with lemonade and talk about Paul's future. I got dressed slowly. Pressed shirt. Slacks. Shoes polished with a rag I kept in the drawer. I combed my thinning hair and looked at myself in the mirror. Not for vanity. For resolve. Carl had helped me prepare everything, the documents, the final proof, the revised title. I had called him the day before and told him I might need him close by. He promised to wait just down the street, parked with coffee and a watchful eye. When I stepped out into the backyard, conversation stopped. There were maybe 30 people there, neighbors, Rachel's friends, even a few I recognized from Paul's childhood. Some stared. Others whispered. A few avoided looking at me at all. Rachel saw me first. Her smile flickered. Henry, this is a private. This is my house, I said, calm but firm. And I have something to say. Paul stood next to the punch table, his hand resting protectively on her back. Dad, this isn't the time. No, I said, walking to the center of the yard. The time was months ago. When you both decided to erase me from my own life. This is the only time left. Someone handed me a microphone, maybe out of awkwardness, maybe thinking I'd make a toast. I took it, held it steady. I see a lot of familiar faces, I began, my voice steady. Some of you watched Paul grow up. Some of you brought casseroles when Marjorie passed. Some of you may not know me at all. That's all right. What matters is that today, you hear the truth. I turned to Paul and Rachel. You planned to put me away. Quietly. You filled out forms, toured facilities, arranged my future without a single conversation. You cleared my things from rooms I paid for, reimagined a life where I was conveniently out of the picture. And when I came home, my home, you acted like I was intruding. There was a hush now. Forks down. Chairs shifting. You told people I was moving. That I was transitioning. You made decisions that weren't yours to make. So I made my own. I pulled the file from my jacket. Held it high. This is the new deed. Legally binding. This house belongs solely to me. And it's now listed for sale. Gasps. Someone dropped a glass. Paul stepped forward, voice tight. You can't do this. I met his eyes. I already have. I turned back to the crowd. I won't be staying here much longer. But neither will they. They've been asked to vacate within 30 days. Rachel's face turned red. This is disgusting. You're humiliating us. No, I said, you did that when you tried to bury me in a hospital bed and rebrand my life as yours. I handed the mic to a stunned guest and walked back inside, closing the door behind me. Inside the quiet, I heard nothing but the thrum of my heart and the distant buzz of voices. I sat in the living room, in the recliner they had moved to the garage, and which I had brought back, waiting. Paul came in half an hour later. Alone. Why'd you do it like that? He asked. In front of everyone? I looked at him, really looked. Because private talks didn't work. And I needed people to see who you became. He sat down heavily. We didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't even think of me. He wiped a hand down his face. Rachel's pregnant. We were trying to build something. You tried to build it on someone else's foundation. And you cracked it. He stood to leave, but paused at the door. You're cutting me out completely? I didn't answer right away. Finally, I said, I'm giving you something more valuable than the house. I'm giving you the chance to remember who you were before you became so entitled. He didn't respond. The door closed quietly behind him. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. Brain, do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The house was silent the next morning. Not the kind of silence that brings peace, no, this was the kind that settles into your bones, like a chill that won't leave. Paul and Rachel kept their distance. I could hear them whispering in their room, doors opening and closing, drawers sliding. But they didn't speak to me. Not a word. Not even a look when we passed in the hallway. I made coffee alone. Ate toast alone. Sat in the recliner, the one they tried to toss, and watched the light pour in through the windows Marjorie had chosen 30 years ago. Warm amber streaks across the floor. It still felt like her in those little things. The sun knew where to land. The town buzzed quickly. I didn't expect it to travel so fast, but word gets around when an old man sells the house out from under his own son, especially when he does it at a baby shower. At the diner, the waitress poured my coffee a little slower than usual. You all right, Mr. Henry? She asked gently. I'm fine, I said. She smiled, polite. But I could tell she wanted to ask more. Everyone did. Some nodded at me with newfound respect. Others, not so kind. A few looked at me like I'd gone senile, like I'd forgotten what family meant. But I hadn't forgotten. I remembered too well. Family isn't just blood. It's loyalty. It's respect. It's not plotting behind someone's back because it's convenient. It's not trying to own what you didn't build. On my way home that afternoon, I took the long route. Past the old hardware store where I bought the first nails for the house. Drove by the church where we said goodbye to Marjorie. Parked for a moment near the elementary school where Paul had once run out into my arms, waving a crayon drawing with my name on it. I thought of all the versions of him I'd known. The baby who used to fall asleep on my chest. The teenager who asked me how to shave. The man who cried at his wedding, holding Rachel's hands like she was the whole sky. And now this stranger. When I got home, there was a man waiting on the front steps. Older, round-shouldered, wearing a corduroy jacket that had seen better days. Mr. Henry? That's me, I said, stepping out of the car. He stood, offered a nervous smile. Name's Martin. Carl told me you might be needing a few hands soon. I raised an eyebrow. I run the veterans drop-in down by the tracks, he explained. He said you were thinking of doing something with the house. A project. I nodded slowly. I've got ideas. Well, he said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket, a few of us are retired. Got time. Got skills. And frankly, not many places to go that feel like home. If you're serious about it. I looked at the paper. 10 names. Phone numbers. Occupations scribbled beside them: electrician, cook, carpenter, nurse. I'm serious, I said. More than ever. He smiled. Then we're with you. After he left, I sat on the porch for a long time. The wind rustled the lemon tree leaves. Somewhere inside, I could hear Rachel pacing. Boxes were being taped. I could hear the familiar hiss and snap. Paul had said nothing since the confrontation. I knew they were figuring out where to go. Maybe to her parents. Maybe back to the city. Maybe somewhere they'd finally have to pay rent. The silence felt different now. Not empty. Clearing. I took Marjorie's photo from the mantel and placed it on the table next to my chair. Her smile still warmed the room. I think we're getting our home back, Marge, I whispered. Not the one full of old memories. But a new kind. One where people want to be here. One that won't forget what it took to build. That night, I slept with the windows open. No one knocked. No one yelled. The house, for the first time in years, felt like it belonged to me again. The idea came to me the same way most good things have in my life, quietly, with no fanfare, while I was doing something simple. I was cleaning out the garage. Not because anyone told me to, but because it felt right. The house was officially listed now, though Dana had agreed to hold off on tours for another week, just to give Paul and Rachel time to leave. I figured if I was going to move on, should do it with dignity, and a clean space. Among the dusty boxes, I found an old wooden crate labeled in Marjorie's handwriting, Hope Chest. Inside were folded blankets, a few baby clothes Paul had outgrown before he was 2, and a notebook. On the first page, written in blue ink, she had written, "If anything ever happens to me, let this house stay full of love. No matter what form that takes." I sat down on the cold garage floor and read those words over and over again. Full of love. I had been so focused on reclaiming the house from those who took it for granted, I hadn't thought about what came next. What would I do when it was empty? Sell it? Move into a retirement condo and wait for my days to fade? No. That wasn't what she wanted. And it wasn't what I wanted either. That night, I called Martin, the man who'd shown up with the list of names from the veterans drop-in. I'm ready, I told him. Let's make something real. We met the next day in the dining room, with coffee and a pad of blank paper between us. He brought along 2 others, Eddie, a retired cook with a warm smile, and Jules, a former nurse who still wore her ID badge like a badge of honor. We brainstormed. Not a shelter. That felt too cold. Not just a boarding house. That felt too transactional. No, what we were building was something deeper. A home. A place for men like me, older, maybe forgotten, maybe burned by family, but still capable of love, laughter, and purpose. A place where dignity wasn't a luxury. Marjorie's house, I said aloud. They all nodded. It started that weekend. We cleared out Rachel's sleek decor, vases that meant nothing, chairs no one sat in, sterile frames that held stock photos of smiling strangers. I donated every piece. Then came the real work. Martin coordinated volunteers. Eddie started sketching out meal plans. Jules drew up a list of basic medical supplies we'd need. I called Carl again. I need the house pulled from the market, I said. He paused. Changed your mind? No, I said. I've found a better buyer, me. He laughed softly. Tell me what you need. We restructured the trust. The house would remain in my name until I passed, then be transferred to the nonprofit we registered, Marjorie's Home Foundation. We kept it simple. The mission? To provide comfort, community, and dignity to those forgotten by their families. Dana, the real estate agent, dropped by once to pick up paperwork. She looked around at the work being done and said, "You're turning this into something bigger than a sale, aren't you?" "I'm turning it into what it was always meant to be," I replied. Word spread. More people showed up. A neighbor offered her sons bunk beds. A local church donated fresh linens. Someone even dropped off a piano. The house buzzed with movement, with life. One afternoon, as I scrubbed the kitchen floor, I realized something strange. I wasn't tired. Not like before. Not the kind of tired that wears on your soul. I was alive. Paul didn't say much during this time. He and Rachel quietly packed their things over several days. She barely looked at me. He tried, once or twice, to ask questions. "What are you doing with the house? Is this really the best use for it?" But I offered no explanations. He left without a fight. Maybe he was too ashamed. Maybe not ashamed enough. I don't know. But I didn't feel anger anymore. Just clarity. The last thing to go was their crib-in-a-box set. Rachel had left it in the garage, still sealed. I donated it to a shelter for single mothers. Marjorie would have liked that. That night, I stood in the backyard. The lemon tree rustled in the wind. Light strung between its branches swayed gently. Martin stood beside me, sipping iced tea. "You really built something here," he said. "Again," I replied. He smiled. Inside the house, Jules and Eddie were laughing over a pot of stew. Two of our first boarders, both veterans, both estranged from their families, were helping set the table. The living room glowed with warm lamps, soft music, and the scent of something comforting. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was healing. It's funny how family can look nothing like you, sound nothing like you, and still feel more like home than the people who share your blood. That's what Marjorie's house had become. We opened our doors quietly. No fanfare, no ribbon cutting. Just a warm meal, clean beds, and a porch light left on. The first to arrive was Albert, a retired bus driver who hadn't spoken to his kids in 7 years. Then came Walt, a widower whose niece sold his house behind his back. And then Freddie, who used to be a mechanic, until a stroke stole his right arm, and his independence. They came with plastic bags, duffel bags, sometimes just the shirts on their backs. But they brought stories. Pain, yes, but also laughter, wisdom, and that old spark that time tries to dim but never really kills. We didn't run it like a shelter. This was a home. Chores were shared. Meals were made together. Birthdays were celebrated, even if the candles were stuck in a slice of grocery store pie. We played cards, watched old movies, sat on the porch and told stories about the dumb things we did when we were young and invincible. No one asked what you had. Only what you needed. And for the first time in a long time, I felt needed too. One morning, I was in the garden, Marjorie's old flower bed, now blooming again, when I heard the front gate squeak. A familiar voice called out, "Grandpa?" I turned. It was Lily. My granddaughter. Paul and Rachel's daughter. She looked taller than I remembered. 17 now, maybe 18. She wore her mother's eyes but had Marjorie's posture, straight and steady, like she belonged exactly where she stood. "Lily," I said, heart rising. "What are you doing here?" She hesitated. "I heard from someone at school, about what you did. The house. The foundation. Everything." I wiped my hands on my jeans. You heard the dramatized version, I'm sure. She stepped closer. Is it true? You let Dad and Mom go, and started over? I nodded. I didn't want to. But they made it clear I was no longer part of their picture. So I made a new one. She looked around the yard, at the porch, the open windows, the sound of men laughing in the kitchen. It's beautiful, she said. It feels warm. You're always welcome here, I said without hesitation. She smiled then. A small one, but real. I don't agree with what they did, she said quietly. I just want you to know that. I know, I said. And it means more than you realize. She didn't stay long, just enough time to walk through the house, meet a few of the men, share a cup of tea with Jules. But before she left, she hugged me. Not the kind of hug teenagers give out of obligation. A real one. Long, solid. Like she meant it. That night, I sat on the porch and wrote in the notebook Marjorie left behind. He didn't protect the house, Marge. But maybe his daughter will remember the roots. More people began stopping by. A neighbor brought cookies. The mailman dropped off books instead of bills. A local high school asked if their seniors could volunteer for service hours. The house, once full of tension, now echoed with joy. One of the boarders, Walt, took over the front garden. Said it gave him purpose. Albert started a chess club on Thursdays. Freddie played harmonica on the porch in the evenings, and even the neighborhood kids started to gather, sitting cross-legged on the lawn like it was a summer concert. Sometimes, I'd catch myself standing in the hallway, looking at all the shoes by the door, mismatched, worn, scattered like memories, and smile. This was the home Marjorie dreamed of. Not a museum of grief or a battleground for entitlement. But a living thing. A sanctuary. A second chance for men who'd been forgotten, and for one old man who'd nearly forgotten himself. I still thought about Paul. Sometimes in anger. Sometimes in sadness. But less and less each day. One night, as I closed up the house, I paused by the front door. There was an envelope wedged into the mailbox. No name. Just my address scribbled hastily. Inside was a photo. It was of Paul. Holding Lily when she was a toddler. Back when things were good. On the back, in faint pencil, were 2 words. I remember. I didn't know what to make of it. A peace offering? A regret? A memory left like a breadcrumb? I placed the photo on the mantel. Next to Marjorie. This house was no longer about what I had lost. It was about what I had found. It had been nearly 3 months since Paul walked out of this house. 3 months since the silence between us stopped feeling like punishment and started feeling like protection. I hadn't heard from him, no calls, no emails, not even a letter. Just that photo in the mailbox. A memory, maybe. A breadcrumb, if he was brave enough to follow it home. So when I opened the door one rainy afternoon and saw him standing there, drenched, exhausted, older than I remembered, I didn't feel surprise. Just stillness. Hey, Dad, he said, voice thin and cracked. Can I come in? I stepped aside. Not because I was ready. But because I had waited long enough not to slam the door. He walked into the living room slowly, his shoes squeaking on the floor Marjorie used to polish every Sunday. His eyes scanned the space, the old pictures back on the walls, the framed mission statement of Marjorie's house by the entryway, the stack of blankets folded neatly in the corner. It's different, he murmured. It's honest, I replied. He nodded once, then sat in the chair across from mine. The same chair he used to crawl into when he was sick and wanted to be close to the fire. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Rain pattered softly on the windows. The house creaked, but not with tension, just with age. Finally, he said, Lily told me she came here. She did. She liked it. I know. Silence again. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He didn't hand it to me, just set it on the coffee table. What's that? My resignation, he said. I raised an eyebrow. From pretending I knew better than you, he added. I waited. I was angry, he said. At life, at stress, at the weight of being an adult. I thought I could fix things by controlling them. Including you. You didn't try to fix anything, I said. You tried to erase me. He swallowed hard. I know. And I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to hear it. From me. There it was. Not an apology wrapped in excuses. Just the raw, broken truth. I leaned back in my chair. I raised you to be strong, I said. To protect what matters. To never take shortcuts with people's trust. He nodded. You did. I failed that. Why now? I asked. Why come back? He looked at me then, for real. Eyes rimmed red. Because I saw what you built, he said. And I realized I don't know how to build anything at all. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then I stood, walked into the kitchen, and returned with something small. It was a key. Not to the front door. But to the shed in the back, the one filled with tools, old plans, and the beginnings of every project I ever started. You want to build something? I said. Start there. He took the key like it weighed 100 pounds. I'm not ready, he said. You weren't ready to be a father either, I said. But you became one. He looked down at the key, then up at me. You don't hate me? I took a breath. No. But I don't trust you. Not yet. He nodded again. No protest. No defense. Just acceptance. He stood, took one last look around, and moved toward the door. Just before he stepped out, he paused. Is there still a place for me here? Someday? I met his eyes. Not in the will. But maybe, in the garden. And that was the truth. He didn't need the house. He needed to grow again. Speech balloon. Would you have forgiven your son in the end? Tell us in the comments below. We held the dedication on a crisp Sunday morning in early spring. The lemon tree in the backyard had just begun to bloom again, small white flowers clinging to the branches, perfuming the air with that familiar citrus sweetness Marjorie always loved. Birds chirped in the distance. The porch had been swept clean, windows polished, and new curtains fluttered in the gentle breeze. We didn't make a big fuss about it. No press. No photographers. Just the people who mattered. The house was full that day. Not with blood relatives, but with real family, people who showed up, stayed, contributed, laughed, and healed together. Veterans, volunteers, a few neighborhood kids. Even Lily came again, helping set up folding chairs and arranging snacks on the porch table. A hand-painted sign now hung above the front door, carved from the old shed's wooden planks. Marjorie's house, a place to come home to. I stood beside it, holding a framed photo of her, our wedding day, her in that simple dress and windblown hair, smiling at me like I was the only man in the world. I had that same feeling now. That she was there, watching it all, proud of what we had done. Martin gave a short speech. This house isn't just a roof and four walls, he said. It's a second chance for men who had nowhere else to go. It's proof that dignity doesn't retire with age, and that kindness never expires. People clapped. Nothing loud, nothing flashy. Just enough to fill the yard with warmth. Inside, the house buzzed with quiet joy. Jules handed out name tags and slices of warm pie. Freddie played his harmonica softly from the porch swing. Albert told a story that had half the room chuckling into their tea. And me? I just stood in the middle of it all, watching life flow around me. The rooms Marjorie once cleaned with loving hands were now alive again. The floors I hammered together now carried the weight of shared steps. The table we ate at for decades now welcomed strangers turned family. Her touch was everywhere, not in things, but in the way people cared for one another. There was no longer any trace of Paul and Rachel's sterile decorations, no lingering scent of resentment or tension. Just life. Honest, imperfect, beautiful life. Later that afternoon, I found Lily standing alone in the garden. She looked up and smiled when I approached. "Dad asked about today," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't tell him the details," she added. "Just that it was beautiful." I nodded. "That's enough." She hesitated, then said, "He's different now. Softer. Quieter." "I hope he's learning," I said. "But some lessons take time." "He regrets what happened," she said. "I see it." "I believe he does," I replied. "And maybe that's enough. Not for inheritance, but for growth." We stood there a while, watching bees dip in and out of blossoms. "You know," she said, "Mom used to say this place was too old-fashioned. But it feels more alive than anywhere I've ever been." "It's not about the age of the house," I said. "It's about the heart that lives inside it." When the sun began to set, people lingered. No one wanted to leave. That's how I knew we'd done it right. One by one, the chairs folded up, the cups were collected, and the porch lights turned on. The final rays of sunlight stretched across the living room floor, golden and warm. As everyone said goodbye, I stepped inside, sat in my old recliner, and let the quiet settle again, not the lonely kind, but the peaceful kind. I picked up Marjorie's notebook one last time. On a fresh page, I wrote. "We did it, love. They tried to take the house, but we turned it into something better. Something they'll never understand. You once said this house should always be full of love. Well, now it is. Not the kind born of blood, but the kind that chooses to stay. We made it a home again." I placed the notebook back on the shelf, beneath the photo of us, and turned off the lamp. The house didn't need my protection anymore. It had its own purpose now. Its own soul. And for the first time in years, I didn't worry about what would happen after I was gone. Because Marjorie's house was alive. And it would keep living, long after me.